Hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining me for episode 57 of Untold Evidence. This episode, delicate by design. There are some very difficult topics to talk about. However, like with everything on this channel, we want to analyse them with the fairest and balanced methodology as we can. So today, we go to August the 8th, 1942. We're in Geneva, Switzerland, neutral ground in the middle of a war that has not yet reached its midpoint. A 31-year-old lawyer named Gerhard Reimer walks into the office of the United States Vice Consul, Howard Elting Jr. Reimer is the Geneva representative of the World Jewish Congress. He hands the Vice Consul a telegram. He asks that it to be transmitted urgently to the State Department in Washington and to Rabbi Stephen Wise, his organization's president in New York. The telegram is, as far as a historical record is able to establish, the first credible, specific, high-level warning to the Allied government that the Nazi regime was implementing a plan to murder every Jew under its control. It described the scale, 3.5 to 4 million people. It described the timeline, autumn 1942. It even described one of the methods being discussed, hydrocyanic acid. Now today we're going to talk about what the Allies knew about the Holocaust, when they knew, and the documented gap between that knowledge and what was done. Riegner's source was a German industrialist named Edward Schult. Schult was the managing director of Geisch, a major Silesian mining farm. He was secretly anti-Nazi. He had connections at the highest level of the German economy and military. And in mid-July 1942, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS and the principal architect of the final solution, had personally inspected the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. Himmler had dined at the villa belonging to Geisch. Within days, the substance of what had been said at the dinner and what Himmler had ordered reached Schult. On the 29th of July 1942, Schult travelled to Switzerland. He passed the information through a Swiss Jewish investment banker named Isor Koppelman, then through Benjamin Sagalowitz at the Association of the Swiss Jewish Communities. The information reached Riegner. Riegner spent the first week of August trying to convince American and British diplomat contacts to take the warning seriously. The text of the telegram, declassified and on the public record, reads in part, quote, "Received alarming report about a plan being discussed and considered in Führer headquarters to exterminate at one fell swoop all Jews in German-controlled countries, comprising 3.5 to 4 million after deportations, and concentration in the East, thus solving the Jewish question once and for all, to stop campaign planned for the autumn methods being discussed, including hydrocyanic acid." That is what the United States Department received in August 1942. The State Department's initial internal response was that the telegram represented, and these are their own words from the internal memorandi, quote, "a wild rumour fueled by Jewish anxieties." The British Foreign Office initially refused to forward the telegram further, and both governments delayed the message reaching Rabbi Wise for almost 3 months. Public pressure, when it eventually came, did produce a response. On the 17th of December 1942, 4 months after Riegner's original telegram, the United States, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and 9 Allied governments in exile released the Joint Declaration on Atrocities. It condemned the, quote, "bloody cruelty and cold-blooded extermination of European Jews." It promised that the war criminals would be punished after the war. It did not promise, and did not include, any plan for rescue. In April 1947, an Anglo-American conference convened in Bermuda, formally to discuss the refugee crisis. The Bermuda Conference produced no substantive policy, no expanded immigration, no diplomatic intervention with neutral countries to accept Jewish refugees, no commitment to specific rescue options. In the mid-1943, and what had been a warning in 1942 was a documented mass killing operation. The Vrba-Wetzler report, a detailed account of Auschwitz operations prepared in April 1944 by two escapees from the camp, Rudolf Vrba and Alfred Wetzler, reached Allied officials and Jewish organizations within weeks. It contained dimensions of the gas chambers, methods, victim counts, and identification of the perpetrators. In the summer of 1944, the American States Army Air Force reconnaissance aircraft photographed the Auschwitz-Birkenau complex. The photographs were taken in connection with bombing missions targeting the IG Farben systematic rubber plant at Monowitz, which sat alongside the camp. Now, the reconnaissance imagery clearly showed the killing facilities. The Allies did not bomb the gas chambers. They did not bomb the rail lines that fed them. They bombed the IG Farben. In January 1944, 18 months after Riegner's original warning, President Roosevelt established the War Refugee Board. By the time the board became operational, the great majority of the European Jews would be murdered or had already been killed. The board, despite its late start and limited resources, is credited with approximately 200,000 lives, primarily through diplomatic intervention in Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. Now the part that every Untold episode that is non-negotiable, the counter-argument. The strongest defenders of Allied conduct during the Holocaust make several arguments that historians have, on the whole, taken seriously. 1. In August 1942, the Allies were militarily on the defensive. The American troops who began fighting in North Africa had been in combat for 1 month. The British were retreating into the Western Desert. Stalingrad had not yet turned. The killing centres in occupied Poland were thousands of miles behind enemy lines, with no realistic Allied military reach. Calls for direct rescue in mid-1942 faced a real hard logistical and strategic flaw. Now we move to number 2. Informational ambiguity in the early years was real. The Riegner telegram was a third-hand, second-hand account, transmitted through informal channels from sources who could not be independently verified. State Department skepticism in August 1942, while wrong, was not, in the conditions of the time, irrational. The lessons of 1917 to 1918 atrocity, the propaganda about Belgium, had made the diplomatic class allergic to unverified atrocity claims. That allergy, in retrospect, was lethal. And number 3, the strategic argument made by the Allied planners, particularly the British Air Ministry, was that the fastest route to ending the camps was the fastest possible Allied victory. That argument was not absurd. It is, however, the argument that was used to refuse the bombing of the rail lines that historians later concluded could have been disrupted at a low cost. And number 4, the historian David Wyman's 1984 book, The Abandonment of the Jews, remains the most influential critical examination of US conduct. Other major scholars, Richard Breitman, Robert Rosen, have offered more measured readings. There is no historian's consensus that more rescue was military achievable. There is also no serious historian's consensus that this was done was any sufficiency. These are real disagreements within mainstream Holocaust scholarship, and they are productive ones. So what was known? So by August 1942, the substance of the final solution in writing on the desk of the United States State Department and the British Foreign Office. By November 1942, the State Department's own confirmation authorising public release. By December 1942, the formal joint declaration of 11 Allied governments. By April 1943, the failure of the Bermuda Conference to produce action. By spring 1944, the Vrba-Wetzler report. By summer 1944, Allied reconnaissance photographs of Auschwitz in the operational files of the United States Army Air Force. What was done? The 17th December 1942 Declaration of Intent to prosecute war criminals after the war. The January 1944 creation of the War Refugee Board, 18 months after Riegner. Bombing missions against the IG Farben that flew over the gas chambers without striking them. Gerhard Riegner survived the war. He continued working for the World Jewish Congress for the next 6 decades. In his memoirs, what he wrote was that he was haunted for the rest of his life by the knowledge that many of the 6 million European Jews murdered in the camps could have been saved if his warning of August 1942 had been acted on properly. Now, if this episode has been useful or interesting, please drop us a like and a subscribe. This potentially has one of the most questions, ambiguity, skepticism, conspiracy around a lot of this channel's content. It is clearly very delicate and it cannot be diminished. But we all know who watch this channel and reading these accounts that there is still a lot of confusion about the what, why and the how. And any comment you have, we will treat with respect and dignity, and we will answer them the best we can. We can leave with one question. What does the Allies' knowledge action gap of 1942 to 1944 teach us about how democracies process credible warnings of mass atrocities? And what could we do in the future to stop these atrocities across all mankind? Nobody wants to see them. This has been Untold Evidence, and thank you very much for joining me on this one. This is the end of episode 57, and we will see you in the next one. Take care.